On October 7th of last year, Hamas attacked Israel, killing a lot of civilians in what is now widely known as a terrorist attack. What are your thoughts on how Israel responded to Hamas?
I think there were two stages to the Israeli response to the Hamas attack on the 7th of October. The first one and the early one, you could call it a revenge or revengeful reaction, namely to try and satisfy what they thought the public wanted, also to cover up for the failure of the army and the intelligence to deal with in protecting the South on the 7th of October. And the ferocity and the brutality at that stage was much more to satisfy this impulse of revenge. I think in the second part, which to my mind started about a month later, namely around November 2023, a certain ideological plan of this particular government that Israel has since November 22 began to unfold, which is to say, let us use this tragedy, this catastrophe, to actually implement an ideological plan. So it was not just revenge, not just destroying the Hamas's military power as to prevent it from committing another assault in the future, but rectifying in their eyes the mistake made in 2005 by the late Ariel Sharon when he withdrew the Jewish settlers from the Gaza Strip and left it outside of Israel's direct control, although it remained since then under Israel's indirect control. And therefore, they were hoping to do two things through this military operation. One is to downsize considerably the number of Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, either through genocide or ethnic cleansing, and Judaizing it again, bringing back the settlers that were withdrawn in 2005 and create a Gaza Strip which is far more Jewish, much less Palestinian, and therefore fitting with this program of most people who now make up the Israeli government of creating a greater Israel from the river to the sea, which is as much as possible exclusively Jewish and without Palestinians in it at all.
What should Israel have done after October 7th?
Well, first of all, because of the number of people that were abducted and the fact that it was holding 8,000 political prisoners, most of them unjustifiably, it should have first of all got into an exchange program, to my mind. Anybody with a bit of strategic understanding would have known that if you don't do the exchange deal immediately, you are where you are today. Namely, 9 months later, with quite a few people already dead among the captive, and very little hope for an exchange deal in the future. So the first thing was to say. Secondly, it should have, but this was maybe asking too much from this particular government, in fact, of any Israeli government, to come and have a kind of a rethink about the whole Palestine question. In many ways, the 7th of October was a third intifada. Israel already experienced two uprisings. Some sort of realization that the occupation of more than 56 years of millions of people against their will is not going to be tolerated by the people themselves. And going into a rethink about this whole issue. But of course, this was asking too much maybe from any Israeli government because they are so much away, they're far away from that kind of thinking, so that the only way they could think was the way they did it. But definitely I would have thought that such an event should be a wake-up call, not to hate the Palestinians more and to say, we have no choice now but just to go on a genocidal policy, but rather say, maybe there's a limit to our power. And thinking what would have happened if the Hezbollah would have joined the Hamas at that day. sort of realizing your precarious situation and analyzing why are you in such a precarious situation. That's what leaders do, not politicians, but leaders do.
Pragmatically, had Israel after October 7th done what you suggested and immediately embarked on a prisoner swap, which I agree, it sounds like an effective way to get those hostages back. But the concern of some is that if you do that, then you're in a way rewarding Hamas, or you're sending them the message that if you launch a terrorist attack on us, Israel, our response will be to grant you what you wish to achieve, which in this case was releasing hostages. Are you not concerned that Israel doing that is sending the message that Israel rewards terrorists?
No. The message that Israel sends is that the violence that is being inflicted on Israel is a response to the violence that Israel inflicted on the Palestinians for 56 years. So either you want to be in this tit-or-tat for violence, we can do it for another 50, 100 years, or you go to the source of violence. And you are not using power here, but you're using wisdom, strategy. Look where Israel is today because of what some people would say was Israel's right to do. Well, let's see where we are. 9 months later, we have a Jewish state that is crumbling, collapsing because of that. There is a Jewish state that became a pariah state in the world. There is a Jewish state that was unable to really wipe out the Hamas. And it's run by Messianic Jews who believe that this catastrophe is good for everyone. I think the proof is there. The policy that Israel pursued, you could have argued with me on the 8th of October, whether I was right or wrong. How can anyone argue with me on, where are we? Were 70th of July, 2024, that this was, how can anyone argue that this was the right policy of Israel?
I don't disagree with you. I really don't.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that sometimes you need voices like mine because I do see the future. I'm not saying that I'm a prophet or anything, but because of experience, I could have told you on the 8th of October that this is how the 17th of July 2024 would look like if Israel is going to do what everybody was afraid it would do and did. So it was worthwhile thinking about an alternative approach. Maybe we wouldn't have a genocide in Gaza, maybe. We would have had the release of the Israeli hostages. And who knows, we might have even had a rethinking about how to reignite a process of reconciliation. But what we have instead is a catastrophe that also destroys Israel, not just the Palestinians.
That I must agree with. I think their response, it's clear, has been catastrophic. And the question that a lot of people are asking, which is the hard question, is what should they have done? What should they do now? The concern I brought up was that it seems like there's sort of a catch-22 in a way. Tell me if you agree. If Israel is a victim of a terrorist attack, which they were on October 7th, if they respond too ferociously, which they have, they become a pariah state. But if they take the opposite approach, and if they respond too peacefully, the fear is that encourages other terrorist groups like Hezbollah to say, hey, look, Israel's weak, we can attack them, because their response to being attacked is to release hostages. So, hey, I'm Hezbollah, I want to get my hostages back, why don't I attack Israel? And the fear is, so how do you balance what I think seems like a bit of a catch-22? Do you see what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but I disagree. And I think the problem is there's a difference between a terrorist attack and a terrorist organization. Hamas is not a terrorist organization. It did use terror on the 7th of October. I don't argue with this. Israel used terror all the time against the Palestinians since the creation of the state and even before the state. So yes, both sides are using terror. That means that if you think that the best way to answer the Israeli terror with Palestinian terror, I'm not sure. Is it good to answer Palestinian terror with Israeli terror? I'm not sure. What I'm saying is that when a cycle of violence becomes to such a level, then you have to think about why there is violence. And that's the only way of getting out of it. Answering terror with terror, which is what Israel is doing and what the Palestinians did because the Israeli terrorized them before, is no way of getting out of it. That's just an assured recipe, I would say, for what you used to call it the Cold War MAD, mutual assured destruction. This is something that you need leaders, not populist leaders who would say, oh, my people would like now revenge for this. Rather, we're saying, wait a minute, this is not the people of Gaza or even Hamas are not just terrorists per se. There are people who were living for 17 years caged inhumanly in a ghetto. And yes, this came out on the 7th of October. But it's not only the 7 years, it's the 56 years of occupation. It's the years of the Nakbas of so many of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are the victims of Israel's ethnic cleansing in 1948. So if you take that into account, it's far more complex by saying you have a group of terrorists that you have to punish. Now, that's a very simplistic reductionist way of looking of why on the 7th of October happened what happened. There's a difference, by the way, because why it happened and the way it happened. There were revolts against colonialism, French colonialism in Algeria. They were very ugly and terrorist, if you want. But this was these were chapters in which the anti-colonialist wish to get rid of French occupation turned into an unacceptable, if you want, acts of violence. But it didn't invalidate the right of the Algerians to get rid of the French. And so many of us are now remember the Nat Turner revolt of the slaves in 1831 in the United States when slaves slaughtered slave owners and their families in part of their attempt to get rid of slavery. So, and these are just two out of many examples. So we have to have this context, which is both a moral, political, and historical context for understanding what the Hamas has done and what Israel is doing. And the way out of it is not to think that what the only way of you can do is to have an action and reaction, and the only ones can be done through violence and terror.
Did Israel have any right to go after Hamas in any capacity after October 7th?
It had the right to chase out the Hamas out of Israel, which they did. And it had, I think, no right whatsoever to occupy the Gaza Strip. It had no right to destroy the Gaza Strip. And if it wished to bring the Hamas people as criminals, if you want, it should also have brought its own soldiers and officers and politicians to the same tribunal. Nobody is innocent there in this story. And therefore, I think that if you want the legal perspective that the ICJ, the ICC, if I'm not mistaken, the ICC has taken, the International Court of Justice, where it blamed both the Israeli government and the Hamas of committing crimes, war crimes, maybe even crimes against humanity. This is an approach I can understand, although I don't think that this again gets to the complexity of what we have here. But yes, if you wanted to pursue a legal procedure against those you think are terrorists, you have to be ready to be open that the same allegations would be directed against you. This is not innocent people. There were innocent citizens attacked by the Hamas. We're not fully, and we don't fully understand what happened on the 7th of October. But let's say this, definitely abduction and killing did happen there, which were violations of international law, undoubtedly. Yes, if you wanted, but you could not be the country that did it, because you are yourself a country that violates international law. So you need an international tribunal if you want an independent investigation. If you remember the 2010 Goldstone report, the Goldstone report was the right approach to the exchange of violence between Israel and the Hamas back in 2009 and 2010. But for that, you have to accept a certain framework of analysis, which, of course, Israel and its supporters will never agree to.
I appreciate what you're saying about the root causes of tension. All that being considered, on October 7th, you still did had a group which intentionally did, as you said, slaughter, killed, kidnapped Israeli civilians. In light of that, I'm asking about to what extent Israel had the right or should have gone after Hamas, and you're mentioning the legal process, but given specifically the civilian targeting, had you rewound the clock and now you, Ilan Pappé, are in charge of the IDF, would you have instructed them perhaps to go after Sinwar or various Hamas operators that perpetuated specifically civilian harm?
No,
or
I wouldn't.
No.
I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I would hope that if I was in such a senior position, as I say, I would be a leader and not just a politician. And as a leader, I would have understood that if I would go against, as you say, if I would pursue this kind of policy, I would get where I am today. Life is not black and white. If you decide to punish the Hamas, the only way you can do it is by getting into the Gaza Strip. If you go into the Gaza Strip, you are where you are today. So if you want to say this is justified, not justified, who cares? What matters is that there is an historical and moral context for the 7th of October. And because of that historical and moral context, any military action of Israel inside the Gaza Strip would have led to the point where we are today. There was no other way of doing it.
But the history doesn't excuse what happened on October 7th.
It's not a matter of excusing. It's a matter of explaining. I'll give you an example. Let's say someone kidnapped a kid in a log, and he is hiding in a flat in Manhattan. What you are saying is, since the only option to get this kid back is to destroy the whole neighborhood in Manhattan, the Manhattan police has the right to do it. It cannot negotiate with the guy. It cannot think about maybe understanding why he did it, and maybe that would lead to the release. No. The only thing is to punish the kidnapper.
Let's go with this analogy. In this analogy, wouldn't one option to be to shoot the kidnapper in the head?
But if you shoot the kidnapper, you will kill another 55 citizens.
I see.
What do you want to do? That's the option. That's the option.
And then, and you don't, and I apologize because this is somewhat of a redundant question.
No, don't worry.
I won't ask many times.
You're raising. It's fine.
Well, I do want to bring this up again because you did respond to this, but I do want to bring this up again. So let's imagine Israel did not respond with force after October 7th. Am I incorrect in thinking that could empower either Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas to then attack more? Like, what I'm saying is deterrence not valid?
No, it isn't.
Is it not important? Is it not essential?
No, it's not essential. Not in the situation.
Sorry. I asked 3 questions. I'm asking too many questions. Let me go to my first question. So, would it have empowered Iran?
No.
Or Hezbollah?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
Because I'm not saying doing nothing. I'm saying let's open a dialogue by which you're willing to really begin a genuine process of ending the violence. This would disempower Iran. This would disempower Hamas. This would disempower anyone who believes in violence. These are not the only. You keep talking about 2 options as if they are the only options that are on the table. I'm sorry. There's a third option. And the third option is for Israelis to realize the nature of the project that they have begun in Palestine and understand the connection between the 7th of October to the nature of the project of Zionism in Palestine and looking for a way of changing it. Because this kind of reconciliation, this kind of the beginning of building a different reality, or if you want, reframing the relationship between the indigenous native Palestinians and the Jewish population, which is the third generation of Jewish settlers, of rebuilding a different future. This empowers anyone who believes that they can use violence in order to change a reality. But the moment you answer violence by violence, you don't give a chance for that. And therefore, again, I'm coming to my point. If Israel would have chosen any option which is not entering the Gaza Strip, it would have opened the way to rethinking about the future. The moment it decided to go into the Gaza Strip, it could have only ended the way we are today in July 2020.